everybody on here and hopefully uh, give you give you some pointers about advocacy because advocacy is something that everybody does at some time in their life. Sometimes they just don't know what it is that they're doing, but I think it's important when you talk about doing advocacy on a larger scale than maybe just individual advocacy. There are some strategies that are important to know about. So that's one of the reasons why, um, we're going to do more of this formal presentation about advocacy, just to talk about those things. So just to give you a little bit of background about me, I have a degree in social work from Ohio Dominican University here in town, and also a criminal justice degree from Xavier University in Cincinnati. I have been a licensed social worker for 47 years. I did 17 years in the juvenile justice system at one of the institutions that's no longer around, probably a good thing. But I worked there for 17 years in a variety of positions with both boys and girls that were adjudicated delinquent in the courts and then sent to the institution. And then I went from there to the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services and was there for about another 15 years. And I worked with foster care, adoption, and eventually kinship programming. Did a lot of program development, policy development around all of those areas. And that's how I got connected with the Ohio Grandparent Kinship Coalition about 22 years ago. And then I retired from the state after that time, and I went to work for the Children's Defense Fund here in Ohio. They have a state office in Ohio. They don't have state offices all around the country in every state, but it is a national organization that is focused on advocating for children and around education, poverty, well-being, health, all of the areas that impact families and children. The Defense Fund is actively advocating for those policies and programs. I also, at that, during that time, I was the Annie Casey Kids Count Program Director, and Annie Casey is another national advocacy organization. The Casey family is behind UPS. That's their claim to fame, and they dedicated money for their mother was Annie E. Casey, so they've used funds to support projects and programs nationally over a number of years to honor their mother. And so one of the projects that they do on a national basis, every state has a Kids Count program, and the Kids Count program is a data-driven program. It looks at all the child well-being indicators: health, nutrition, school, housing. They look at those every year to see whether states are improving, what they're doing to improve, whether they're not improving, looking at ways to improve. And it's a way to give data to legislators, policymakers, to show where we are doing well and where we're not doing well and where we need to put our focus. So I did that for that time. And again, then I've been a part of OGKC for 22 years. Initially in my role as the coordinator for the kinship program at Job and Family. And then once I retired, I just maintained my involvement with them as an advocate. So that's pretty much my background. It sort of lends itself to be an advocate in different areas and programs over my career. And, I feel good about doing it. I feel it's something I can give back to, the community. So I intend to hopefully stay with it as long as I can. So let's talk about advocacy. Who has a good idea of what advocacy is? Somebody have a sort of a definition of what they think advocacy is?
Stepping in to help.
A guess? Go ahead. I didn't hear you, Pandora.
Oh, stepping in to help someone.
Uh-huh. Yep. That's a big part of advocating, stepping in to help somebody. Yep. In fact, that's probably the umbrella over advocacy is that is definitely the goal of helping. So in terms of does anybody feel that they've done advocacy work? Is that something that you've done formally or informal advocacy? Is there something that you feel you've done formally or informally to advocate?
When I was growing up, my parents were immigrants and didn't speak English. So as a child, I was kind of like in charge, helping them navigate, how things worked in this country versus where they came from. So I was kind of that child that helped with not just the language, but how to navigate what they needed to get done. Back in those days, if you didn't speak English, there wasn't much help for you.
Right. Excellent, excellent example of, even now, we live in a very multicultural neighborhood, and there are quite a few families here that are, from other countries where the parents don't speak English, and you see the kids doing that same thing for them,
Yeah.
helping them navigate, the community. And so, yes, that's a big role, a big advocacy role. You're right. So in terms of specifics about what is advocacy, active support, just like you said, Pandora, you're out there supporting something for somebody. And in doing that, you're standing up and speaking out for others, ensuring that everyone can live the lives for which they were created. And you're trying to get support from others by creating a supportive environment. And that's a broader part of advocacy, when you're getting outside of your own personal advocacy or maybe a one-on-one advocacy. When you broaden out, you're looking at creating a more supportive environment and including other people. One of the definitions I did find for advocacy is any action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends, or pleads on behalf of others. And that's a definition that was from the Missouri Foundation for Health. One of the keys to advocacy is trying not to be divisive or antagonistic. You don't want to alienate people when you're out advocating. You don't want to, start pointing fingers or saying, what one person is doing is wrong. You want to put your position out there, and you want to support it and have other people understand it with valid information, with data and personal stories. And once you do that, then hopefully you'll bring people on board, especially with stories. People's personal stories are very important when you're advocating. The data is very important too, but to have a personal story behind the data is very impactful, and it shows that to a lot of people that they're not alone in a situation. There's other people out there trying to do some things to make things better, and so that's a key to getting people to support your advocacy role. Then they're divided into types of advocacy, and I think we touched on some self-advocacy. Can somebody think of something that you do to advocate for yourself? What would be something that you're advocating for yourself? How about, were you going to say something, Pandora?
No, I'm just trying to think.
How about if you, on your job and you feel like you deserve a raise, and you go into your employer and give him all the reasons why you feel that you deserve an increase in your raise. And you sort of have to go in with some specific kinds of things about the type of work you're doing, the quality of work, what your evaluations have shown over the last year or 2 years, just those kinds of things to support your asking for the raise. It's not going to be probably good enough for just to go in and say, hey, I like a raise, but you got to show your employer why it's worth them giving you an additional 50 cents, a dollar, whatever on the hour to them to keep you around, because then the other alternative is you might go looking for a better job. So they have to value enough that you have to show them your value in order to warrant getting some extra money. So that would be sort of an example of self-advocacy. And then individual advocacy, I think I think it was Teresa, you were already saying how you are helping your parents, you were helping them navigate the community, navigate society here in America. And so you were advocating on behalf of individuals. As caregivers, you advocate on behalf of your grandchildren or whoever you're taking care of. You go to school, you make sure that they're getting the courses they need, the help that they need, the support they need. You go to the doctor, you make sure that they're getting everything that they need medically, their immunizations, getting their health checks. So you're advocating every time you go to make sure that that child is getting what they need and what's necessary for their quality of life. You're advocating for an individual. And then we go to a broader type of advocacy, which would be a systems advocacy. And this is where you're actually trying to influence social or political or economic systems to bring about a change for groups that are being sort of overlooked. And, right now we're probably in the biggest systems advocacy going on right now with everything that's going on. You've got the pandemic where people are advocating for healthcare, for treatments, for the vaccine. I mean, everybody's out there trying to do what needs to be done, doing the right thing, wearing the mask, staying socially distanced. All of that is geared toward the health system around this COVID-19. Also, with the Black Lives Matter, you've got protests going on. You've got people, going and talking with legislators, with their local community legislators and policy people. That's another big system advocacy piece that's going on right now. So, we're living in the middle of some huge advocacy activities that are going on right now. And then you have legal advocacy where you're taking action to protect legal rights by either using attorneys or the legal system. And can anybody think of right now what's going on that we're looking at in terms of protecting our legal rights? What's coming up in about 2 weeks?
Voting.
Yeah. Yep. So people have been out there, there's been some challenges to the voting system. There's been a challenge, there's challenges to questioning the validity of our voting system, and people are out there saying, no, it's working, trust it. And so that's one of the big legal rights that we have is voting, and we want to protect that right for everybody. Let's see. Oops. Yeah. So there are specific strategies, and you can even apply this, a little bit to your own personal advocacy and then individual advocacy. But mainly overall, it really applies to the systems and the legal advocacy, because in order to get the attention of, say a legislator who has hundreds of people coming at them wanting something. A lot of times, people are contacting the legislators for different kinds of things. And so in order to really make an impression on that legislator and really take advantage of the little bit of time that you're going to get with them, because you're not going to get a lot of time. If you're lucky, if you're even lucky enough to talk with them, that's something that's really a rare occasion. Usually you end up talking to their aide. Every legislator has an aide, and they usually field all of the incoming calls, requests, that kind of thing, and sort of screen them. And so if you end up talking to the legislator themselves, you're really making headway. So you want to be prepared, and you want to take advantage of the time that you have with them. Usually it's less than half an hour. It's more like 15, 20 minutes in their schedule for sitting down and talking to somebody. So you want to have all your ducks in a row, and so that you make sure that you've done some research, and you've looked at data, and you're bringing to the table what you think is going to improve some kind of situation or condition by talking with this legislator and maybe getting some legislation passed. That's important, to do research and have data that can support what you're doing. Outreach and organizing, that is important to get people on board with you. To be out there by yourself, it's going to be hard to make a difference in the big picture. So you want to get people, you want to get organizations on board with you, and you want them to have a like mind in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. And so that's important. Then you have administrative advocacy, where you're looking at talking with say a department head of maybe a state department or a local mayor, somebody at an administrative position that you want to see policy change. That's a lot of times when people go to the school board, when they go to city council, they're going to try to get some changes done with policy. Legislative advocacy, again, we talk about making appointments to speak with legislators or their aides, going to testify at hearings for legislation, either testifying for or against. Those are important situations to know about, and it's important because there are certain times where the public can go and give input into legislation, and that's generally during the public hearings, but you have to know when those are going on. And so you sort of have to educate yourself about how the system works. And just because I was in it for so long, I learned how the system works, and know the certain opportunities that the public has, but a lot of times the public doesn't know that. So it's good to educate yourself, and later on in the presentation, I'll give you some information where you can go and do that. And then you have your legal advocacy, which is where you're actually impacting through the legal system, the court system, and generally that involves being part of the legal system. A CASA, and I don't know, some of you may have been involved with CASAs, court-appointed special attorneys. These are people who are not necessarily attorneys. Anybody can be a CASA. You just have to go through the training that they have. And then once you're trained as a CASA, then you work with families and children to help navigate the court system for them. And so, a private individual can become a CASA if they want to and go through the proper instruction. And then there's a guardian ad litem, GAL, which are attorneys. And the attorneys are those, the GALs are those attorneys who are advocating for the child in the court system when the child comes into custody of a children's services agency, or there's some legal situation for that child. Generally, the court appoints a guardian ad litem, and then that person follows that child through the system to make recommendation on what's in the best interest of the child. That's their only concern. They're not concerned with the family. They just focus on what's in the best interest of the child. And then there's pro bono advocacy, where attorneys are required, and I don't know how many hours a year that they're required to do this, but to provide free legal services. And they're generally free legal services to people who are underserved, who don't have access to legal advice because of limited income or no income. So generally it's for people who, are homeless or, low income, or for example, if you're on Social Security and you don't have extra money to hire an attorney, then a lot of times you can ask for somebody who's doing pro bono services. And so it never hurts to ask. And I don't know what the income limits are to get pro bono services, but it's always something that you might want to ask for if you have to go to an attorney to get legal services. And then again, we talked about personal advocacy, where you're advocating either for yourself or another individual. So it's, just to know the different types of advocacy, what the different areas that you can advocate in, and how you can become involved in those areas. Anybody have any questions about those types of advocacy or involvement? Okay. Next, advocacy, it can consume a lot of time and energy and effort, depending on what it is that you're advocating for and the kinds of outcomes you want. Sometimes you can have short-term, and a short-term advocacy project where maybe you're trying to raise a certain amount of money for doing something at your church. And so you set a goal to raise the money, you go out, maybe canvass the neighborhood, or maybe you're having a bake sale and you're trying to advocate to buy clothing for the people in the community who aren't able to get clothing on their own. So that would be sort of a short-term situation where you're going to advocate for the well-being of part of your community. And then once you raise your money for whatever you've decided, then that's pretty much over. And hopefully you've been able to get your faith community involved in your community, and everything works out. And then there's long-term advocacies where you have a long-term commitment. You're looking for long-term support. And so you have to decide how to put your energy and your efforts. So sometimes you have to pick your battles. You can't go out and, carry a picket sign for everything that comes along. And sometimes people can do that. They do that, but then that's their focus. That's their life work, and that's great. But if you're a typical, individual working, taking care of kids, that kind of thing, you've got to pick what you're going to be able to put your energy and your efforts into. So those are some things to consider because you don't want to commit yourself to something that first you aren't able to see through, because it sort of sets the rest of the group up for maybe some expectations, and then you're not able to follow through. And then for yourself, you don't want to feel like you've not followed through with something that you've made a commitment to. So that's why it's really important to pick your battles and pick where you want to put your energy and efforts. So one of the strategies that we looked at earlier was research and public education. It's important to document the problem. Over the weekend, how many of you watched the news on the weekend? But there were two groups that were out advocating, sort of making people aware of. They were Mothers Against Violence, and these were mothers who have lost children due to violence. And what they were showing was, and the data and the documentation they had was that over the last year, there have been more young people killed than in the previous year. The average age right now for young people being killed violently is about 24 years old. And generally, it's a lot higher than that, the age for people being murdered. So there are two groups over the weekend that were out picketing. They were out, you know, getting the word out about the situation. And what they did to call attention to the issue was, first off, they had people that were there working for what they were advocating for about the violence. They had groups of people out there with signs and showing what they were supporting, and they had media coverage. And that was very important because with media coverage, you really open up your world. Media coverage, the social media right now is an excellent way to get information out to people about what kinds of issues are out there and what needs to be done. And so those were two things that I noted that they had. The third thing they had was they had the mayor out there, and he was supporting them with the information that he's gotten from the police and the other community individuals that are involved in this in the community. And so he lent a real credibility to the issue by having him out there. So they were doing all the right things to bring attention to their what they were advocating for is stopping the violence. They want to stop violence against the young people in our community. And then tonight again, they were back on. Both groups were back on TV again. So again, they've got momentum right now. They've got the media behind them. They've got the community behind them. They have their faith community. They brought the churches in. So they're telling their stories. And a couple of mothers on there had pictures of the children that had been killed. They held the pictures up. They talked about the loss, what the impact is, not just on them, but the rest of the community, what their children were doing in the community. So they had their stories to go along with the facts that they were presenting. And they were communicating it through media, varying the message for different audiences, and keeping it simple. It's a very simple ask that they have. Let's stop the violence. Let's stop the killing. And they're creating a buzz by keeping it out in front of the public. I'm sure they're using social media for this. They're using their faith communities, the churches that are out here. So they've really put together a strong advocacy platform to stop the violence against the children. And they've done, they're doing a good job. The other group that was rallying also had taken their rally down to the State House, which a lot of times gets in legislators involved. If you see a legislator walking across the State House lawn, you might call them over and say, hey, what do you think about this? And so it's important to the location sometimes where you hold your event is important too, in order to get the right people there. OGKC has in the past years, not so much now because of the virus, but we've held legislative days. We've held legislative rallies at the State House where we brought people in by buses from all over the state. And what we did was we set up meetings with legislators. And after the rally at the State House, after we, had our little picket signs and we're out there talking and getting the message out, then we had made appointments with legislators. So we went to visit our legislators and we each had an index card. And on the index card, there were bullet points of what we wanted the legislators to focus on in the upcoming, when they came back to pass legislation. So if there was an opportunity for them to support more money for kinship caregivers, then we had that on there as a bullet point. So that would be there in front of them, to remind them that these are things that your constituents are wanting and needing, and you need to pay attention. What a lot of people don't realize is the legislators work for us. We pay their salaries, we elect them, and no matter what party they are, or no matter what party you are, they are there to serve you. And I know it doesn't seem that way right now, but that we have to hold them accountable for that, because that's what they're elected for. They're there to serve everybody, not just the party that they're affiliated with. So we have to hold them accountable to the people in the community, to the people that they are responsible to, and keep them honest, and keep them aware of what they're what the people in their community need. Um, then one of the next strategies is outreach and organization. Again, you want to go out and get people that may be allies to you, like your faith community, people, some of your community organizations. And then there's also unlikely allies. Again, maybe the police may not be, somebody you would think of, but they want to be involved in the community. They want good community relationships. So you may want to pull the police in for something that is related to criminal offenses. So you want to look for people that can support and help you get your message out and establish relationships. You want to keep your message simple, and you want to have it to be one message. You don't want to be confusing. So you can have multiple messengers, but you want to maintain the same message across the board. And then take advantage of opportunities. Again, say your church might be having a bake sale, and you might be able to set up a table at the bake sale with some literature about the Ohio Grandparent Kinship Coalition, to advocate for their involvement and help support the coalition and some of the work that we're doing. So you have to take advantage of opportunities when you see them come up. They, might be something you normally think about, but sometimes, when you see an opportunity to get out and talk with people, then it's something that you can do and support your message. And again, you want to be clear about the goals, just like with the message. You want your short and long-term goals. If one of them is to raise $100,000, that's your short-term goal. The long-term goal is to be able to use that money to provide some services or some materials for people in your community. And then anytime you achieve part of your goal, it doesn't have to be the whole goal, then sort of have a celebration for it. Maybe have a little party where you have donuts and cookies or coffee. I know it's hard now to do that kind of stuff, but you just want to celebrate. Even if you just send emails out saying, hey, congratulations, we did a good job, we raised $10,000 of the $100,000. Businesses are also good allies to get out and get them to support, because they like to see their names on T-shirts or on a maybe on a plaque or something. So when businesses support you, it's good to recognize them also. We have legislators who supported us in the past at OGKC, and when we've had our conferences, we'll do sort of a legislator of the year or kinship legislator of the year. So we give them a little plaque that they can take back and show that they've really been supportive of what people are asking them for. And then again, there's administrative advocacy, which is the policy areas where people make policy decisions and rules. And they're generally your state offices, like the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, Bureau of Workers' Comp. Those organizations generally are the ones that are in the business of making sure policies are made to implement rules. And so, if they're making these rules and regulations, you have to make sure they're accountable for those, that, if there are issues that they're not doing what they need to do, then you have to make a decision on if you want to go and hold them accountable. One of the issues that we're trying to hold the Department of Job and Family Services accountable for is the kinship care payments, like foster care payments. And now this is not for everybody, it's just for a certain group of people and kids who meet the definition, but it would provide the same amount of money that foster caregivers get for kinship caregivers. And there's a lawsuit that was filed, and the court agreed with the findings of the lawsuit that kinship caregivers should be getting the same amount of money as foster caregivers, but the state hasn't been willing to implement that. And so we've been working with Job and Family Services trying to find out when they're going to do this, how they're going to do it, and how soon, because this has been something that's been going on for a couple of years now. So OGKC has been advocating for this for the caregivers that would qualify for it, and working with Job and Family Services to try to get them to implement those. So it's important to know, and I know, just everyday life, you're not going to do this, but it's important to have somebody who's willing to look into and be knowledgeable about legislation and policies and procedures, or have connections to people that do, because that helps you get into where you need to go to make sure changes are being made, or make sure the rules and the regulations are being followed. So that's one of the biggest examples I have right now of what we're doing. Again, you can, public has opportunities to go testify on rule changes, rule implementation policies at the state level, and as well as the federal level. And it's good to, be aware of what's going on federally, or have somebody aware of what's going on federally also. Keys to effective legislative advocacy. You identify what the problem is. If there's not legislation that exists now, then you want somebody to create the legislation. And so you look at what needs to be done, you identify the issue, and then you offer a solution, long-term and short-term. It's not usually enough to just say this is the problem. It's like the saying is, if if you're either part of the problem or part of the solution. So if you can identify a problem, instead of just complaining about it, try to come up with a solution that will somebody would be willing to listen to. And so you want that to be a big part of when you go to ask for something to be done, that you do have a solution in mind. You use your research and data to support your solution and what the problem is. Again, highlight the personal stories, like we go back to the women that, or the mothers, the women who are advocating for stopping the violence. Highlight your personal stories, tell your stories. A lot of times when you tell your story, you might have a legislator or an administrator who can relate to that. They either know a family member, a community member, a relative, or a neighbor, or even themselves who have experienced the same thing. And you right there, you have a connection. So telling your story is very important. Building a coalition, just like these mothers. They've started to build a coalition of other mothers, and then other people in the community who are witnessing violence, and they don't want their children to be part of this. So you start to build a coalition of people that are agreeing with you, and have some reason to be part of this, involving the people that are directly affected. Again, that's part of the building of the coalition. Engage your community, your faith-based community, the businesses in your neighborhoods. Those businesses are being affected by the violence also. I mean, if you have a shooting in the store in your neighborhood, people don't feel comfortable. They don't feel safe going into that store. So you want to get businesses involved in providing support. And a lot of times, financial support will come from those businesses. And then again, public will, like they're getting on TV, they're getting their message out. I'm seeing it and I'm saying, oh, yeah, this is something that I might want to be involved with. So, you get your message out, you get it out as broadly as you can, and hopefully then you'll get support that way. And again, you want to communicate effectively. You want to make sure your message is heard and it's plain and simple and people can understand it. Any questions, any comments, anything that people feel like maybe they've done some of this sometime in their life along the way? Probably a little bit here and there. And, it's, you're never too old, you're never too young there's always something out there that people need help with. So, yep. So, you may end up being, part of a group somewhere down the road here, even before the election happens. So, um, again, it's important to know about legislative schedules when legislators are in their offices, when they're at home. Um, all legislators have an office down here at the State House. The senators and the representatives all have an office down here at Broad and High. Either the senators are in the actual State House, and the representatives are across the street in the Rife building. So it's either one of those two places that you'll be able to, if you set up a meeting, you'd be able to meet with your senator or your legislator. And then federal legislature, and then during their off times, like when they're on breaks for holidays, like probably coming up now, there's going to be a break for the holidays. They come back to their home areas. So they'll come back to their home office, and you can set up meetings with them. So say, for example, if you live in Dayton in Montgomery County, the legislator from Montgomery County has an office here as well as an office in Montgomery County. So if you can't make it up here, then you try to schedule a time when they're there at home in their home office and meet with them then. So it's convenient for you. It's not convenient for them. It's what's convenient for you to meet with them. So it's important to find out when their schedules are and get to know, when they're in what location they're in and when. And you also want to get to know your policymakers, what agencies make policies. Like I said, Job and Family Services makes policies for our food stamps, for your child care, for the cash assistance that any of you may be getting, the Medicaid coverage. That all comes under Job and Family Services. So they're the ones that make the policies and rules that govern those programs at the county level. And then the counties implement them. So Job and Family makes the rules. The counties implement the rules based on what Job and Family says they are supposed to do with those. Identify legislators or policy people, even locally, your policy people, your city council people, your board of education people. They're all the ones right now. What are we dealing with education? What's the big deal that's going on with education right now that their policy people are making decisions about that's affecting everybody? It's whether the kids are going to be in school full-time, part-time, hybrid. They're sitting down and making these decisions. But here, if you've noticed here in the Columbus area, our Gahanna school district, their teachers went on strike last week, and for over a 2-week period, because they didn't feel like the board had addressed what needed to be addressed. So they advocated for themselves, and they evidently won some things because they settled their contract, and now the kids are going to be hopefully back in school on a hybrid model. But all of this is being decided at the policy level and at the board level. So city council, if you have something going on within your community, a lot of times you can go to city council and schedule your ability to talk there. You set up a speaker's request, and then you can speak at city council. Same way at the Board of Education. You put in a speaker's request when they meet, and you can meet with them at their regular meeting and let them know what your issues are. And I've seen people who make this their life because they want changes made. So they're at every city council meeting, they're at every Board of Education meeting, and they're there advocating for what they want changed. And they don't, they're not giving up. They're going to stay with it until something happens. So you want to make sure you educate yourself about where you go to try to make changes, and then make sure you find out how you get in to make the change. What you need to do to be involved in a city council meeting, how you meet your legislator. And then once you meet with them, always have an ask. Again, have your ask, and then have what you think needs to be done, a solution for that. And then if they do something for you, if even though it may not be everything you wanted, you want to acknowledge that. You need either maybe have an article in the newspaper, or again, recognize them some way at your church or something like that to show that you're appreciative of what they've done. And the website that's listed here is, if you go to that website, you can plug in your zip code, and it will bring up your state legislators. So you'll find out. If you don't know, and a lot of people, I mean, hopefully most people know who their senator and their representatives are. But if you don't know who they are, just go to the website, plug in your zip code, and it'll bring them up. And then there's also a link on there for legislation, any kind of current legislation that may be, being heard at the in the legislature. So you can go on there, and it'll give you the title of the legislation, and then if you click on that, you'll be able to see more about what the legislation is about. So that's a way that you can find out what's going on at the state level. Now, we also have legislators at the federal level. Senator Brown, Senator Portman are our federal representatives. We work very closely with Senator Brown around kinship issues. He's been a very supportive advocate, and has put forward legislation to help support caregivers. We've met with him about trying to educate him and his staff about, increasing the, we'd like to see the TANF money increase, but the other two issues about food stamps and childcare that don't link those to income of the caregivers, because of that, most caregivers aren't eligible for food stamps or childcare if they're working. So we've educated them on that, and hopefully at some point that will move forward, and we can get that. Just like you have the cash assistance payment is not connected to your income. We're hoping that we can get child care and food stamps disconnected from your income also. And then these next couple of slides are really just some examples of the kind of testimony you can provide. This is some testimony I provided when I was with the Children's Defense Fund and working with the Grandparent Coalition. And you can provide testimony. You can go and speak in front of the legislators in their committees. Generally, you have it written out so you can read it, and then you leave a copy of it with them. Or you can just provide the written testimony. You can send, I believe you have to send 25 copies depending on what committee it's for, but you have to send copies in for all of the committee members, and then that goes on record that you have provided testimony. And so again, when you go to that legislative link on the website, generally it'll show if a piece of legislation is coming up for a hearing, and what kind of hearing it is, what committee it's in, and who the members of the committee are, so you can look and see if any of your representatives or senators are on that committee, and you can connect directly with them. So this is just an example of some written testimony that I did during my work at Children's Defense Fund, talking about the Kinship Permanency Incentive Program and wanting support for that. And so it shows the data that I used, and some of the examples of how it helped people, and then talking about how Ohio has been recognized as a leader. And so we want to maintain our leadership role in kinship care, and we don't want to go backwards. So with the support of OGKC, we wanted to see that done. And fortunately, the KPI program is still being funded, so they see that as a good thing. And then this is just another example of acknowledging what they've done to support, what they were doing to support the programs. So the last piece is in terms of how you can, how the kinds of things to think about when you're advocating with policymakers is you have a passion, and generally you're not going to step out there and put yourself out there and put time and energy into something that you don't feel strongly about. So having a passion is important. You're prepared with data, with stories, with information, with answers to questions. And if you can't answer the question, the best response to give is, I'll get back with you with that answer. And then follow up with, getting back with somebody about the question that they had. Make sure you have the political will, that you're connected to your legislators, you're connected to the people that are responsible for passing the law, passing the bill, passing any kind of rules. Make sure that you've connected with them. And then be willing to partner with other organizations. Like I said, these two groups of mothers were two individual groups, but they have come together now. And on tonight's broadcast, they were both talking about how they've come together now to work together as a cohesive group. They don't want to be working in opposite directions. They want to work together. So be willing to partner with other organizations or groups that are willing to come to the table with you. Be pragmatic and be willing to compromise. You're not always going to get 100% of what you ask for, but sometimes you'll get part of what you ask for now, and then you may have to wait and get part of it later. You don't want to give up, but you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot either. So just sort of be willing to compromise and take the small wins as something to keep you motivated to go on for the other pieces of it. Patience is another big goal that and tip that you want to hold on to, in terms of everything's not going to happen at once. You see these protesters that, we've been involved with civil rights since the 60s. So the people have been patient, and they're trying to work to get to where they feel we should be. So being patient is very important. Again, being polite. Don't be divisive. Don't be antagonistic. Pointing fingers and putting the blame on somebody is not going to get you anywhere. Trying to figure out how you can work together and how you can encourage people and support people. But also be persistent. Don't give up at the first no that you get. Just figure out a way to get around that no, and go and come at it a different way. Come at it with a different attitude, or a different set of facts, or a different story. Just don't give up at the slight feeling that things aren't going to work out or go your way right away. And then persevere. Again, just keep at it. Don't give up. Keep pulling in people that are thinking like you, feeling like you, want to see a change. Just keep going. Just keep going. Just like in Finding Nemo, the part that I always remember is Dory, and when all the fish are in that net and they're sinking to the bottom, and all of a sudden she said, just keep, going up. They, swim up, swim up. So when they all put their power and their might together and did the one thing, everybody was doing the same thing at the same time. They just floated right up to the top. So yeah, you just want to keep going. And the last slide is just some sort of like words of wisdom about advocacy when you're speaking in support of human concerns or needs. It's, when people have their own voice, advocacy means making sure that they are heard, empowering them. You don't always want to speak for somebody if they're able to speak for themselves. And so you want to make sure that they're empowered and they can use their own voice and they can tell their own story. But when people have difficulty speaking, and Teresa, I think that's your example is, the best example of this, that your parents couldn't really speak for themselves. And so you were their voice, and you provided the links for them to be able to make it. So you have to know when somebody really is having difficulty speaking and where you need to step in. And then if they don't have a voice, especially kids don't have a voice, they don't vote, they don't have money. And so when I was at Children's Defense Fund, that was one of the big focuses that we had, was children don't have a voice, so we have to be their voice. And so we had to speak for them also. So advocacy means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but hopefully, you know, you sort of get a good idea of how to break it down and how you have to decide where your energy and how you put your time and focus on issues that you think are important.